Hi, I'm Gretchen Baskerville, the author of The Life-Saving Divorce, Hope for People Leaving Destructive Relationships. And today we're going to discuss the question, how can I claim to be the innocent spouse? I mean, after all, I had my faults too. On a recent Facebook post, we were talking about the Bible allowing remarriage for the innocent spouse after a valid divorce. After all, God doesn't hold you responsible for your spouse's cheating, or abuse, or neglect, or drug and alcohol problems, or sexual addictions. No one forced them to behave this way, and surely they had other options, such as counseling, or learning communication skills if they thought you were the problem. But several people said, wait a second, how can I claim to be the innocent spouse? I'm sure not perfect. Well, neither am I. One woman said something like this: I know I wasn't the one who committed adultery. I wasn't the abuser. But I have a hard time calling myself innocent. I got angry. I lashed out at times. I said a lot of mean things. And the men in my Facebook page said the same thing. I wasn't perfect by any means, and I'm not completely innocent, but I was taught a good Christian husband must sacrifice his wants to make his wife happy. I took it seriously. Still, I can't help but feel like I was the bad guy. I told myself, if only I could have been better, I could have made it work. What this shows is that good spouses are really hard on themselves. They are invested in the relationship, as therapist Bob Hamp says. They want their marriage to be a good marriage, and so they bend over backwards to make it work. They wondered if they could be doing more to make the marriage better. The invested spouse was the one who bought and read all the marriage books, signed up for marriage retreats and classes, tried to find a counselor that their spouse would agree to, set appointments for marriage counseling, prayed and fasted about the marriage, got tense when they heard their spouse come home, checked everything to make sure everything was perfect, journaled and pleaded with the Lord to improve their difficult marriage. These are the people who had a lot of self-doubt, wondering if they really tried as hard as they could. They reminded themselves over and over to be more loving and forgiving and not to give up hope. They scrutinized their own behavior. They doubted themselves. They had very sensitive consciences. They second-guessed their own motives. They gave the other spouse the benefit of doubt over and over. They said to themselves things like, I shouldn't have yelled at him like that. I should have been kinder. Maybe I shouldn't have confronted her over the missing rent money. I mean, I'm not perfect either. Was I responding out of anger when I caught him lying? Maybe she wasn't really flirting with that guy. She's just playful and loves to sit on people's laps. And with this much investment, we can all understand why good spouses would get angry at the one who doesn't invest to make the marriage loving, kind, or safe. In contrast, the destructive spouse excuses or minimizes their bad behavior, or tells you you're too demanding. They blame it on something you did or didn't do. They guilt you for being angry, saying it's not Christ-like. They don't sit up at night worrying about their own sinful behavior. They don't volunteer to take responsibility for making the marriage loving. They're the ones who define saving the marriage as simply blocking you from leaving, rather than actually changing their behavior. They tell you to forgive, because that's what true Christians must do. They don't turn themselves inside out, looking for ways to improve as a spouse. They might even quote Bible verses at you, but insist that you make all the changes. They often don't admit sin or misdeeds unless you make a big deal and threaten to leave. Perhaps they claim you misunderstood or imply that you have no rights to complain because you're not perfect either. They dismiss your injuries. the very injuries they inflicted on you and on others. And I have a list of 150 examples of gaslighting and emotional abuse on page 132 to 142 of my book, The Life-Saving Divorce. So let me tell you a story. One woman told about her husband, who claimed to be the one who was more committed to the marriage than she was. And I'm grateful to this woman for giving me permission to put her story in this blog post. And as always, I want to make it clear that sometimes it's the husband who's genuinely invested in making the marriage safe and loving, and not the wife. Sometimes she's the self-absorbed one who abuses or betrays her husband. I have several stories in Chapter 9 and elsewhere in my book about men as victims of abuse or adultery. Now I'd like to read a Facebook note that I received from one woman. And of course I have to put on my glasses so I can read this. She says, "Gretchen, this was my experience exactly. After many years of reading all the books, attending all the couples Bible studies alone, finding counselors, scheduling and attending marriage retreats, implementing all I read and learned, I finally had permission in my own heart to leave. Once I made it known that I was leaving, he would take my keys, block me in, yell at me all the time that I would ruin our kids' lives, that I was just like my mother or sister who are both divorced. And he would say over and over, 'I'm the only one fighting for our marriage. I'm going to keep fighting for our marriage until it's saved. You'll never make it on your own. I am the one who has worked for everything we have. You're lazy and this is all your fault.' I once told him, 'Do you realize that fighting with me is not the same as fighting for our marriage?' He was so angry and contentious all the time that I don't think he actually understood. I'm 2 years out of this marriage. I have conflict-free relationships with others. My kids and I have a peaceful and loving home. I couldn't be more grateful for this community." That's a powerful message. She wants a safe and loving marriage. And we have evidence. She's spent time, effort, and money buying marriage books, finding therapists her husband will see, and arranging for them to go on marriage retreats. She's changed her behavior to match the advice of Christian marriage book authors. She's committed. I sense she loved her husband, or at least wanted to have a good marriage with him. But after she'd tried everything, she realized these steps had been a one-way street. The marriage isn't better. It's actually worse. When she finally gave up and let him know, he had a choice: to either invest and make the marriage better, or to block her from leaving. He chose the latter. He merely wants to be married. He doesn't care to make the marriage loving. How do we know? Because he's defined saving the marriage as blocking her from leaving, using coercion, for example, taking her keys, physical restraint and bullying, for example, blocking her car, false accusations such as "you're lazy," fear bombing, "you'll ruin our kids' lives," intimidation, "he's angry and contentious," demeaning, "you'll never make it on your own," devaluing, implying that she has made no contribution to the family's success. Rather than actually changing his attitude and investing to make the marriage safe and respectful, he manipulates. Notice the end of her story. She and the kids have a peaceful and loving home now. How can he claim to believe in the sanctity of marriage? Where is his love and his sacrifice? Does he have a pang of conscience and go to therapy to work on himself? Or does he just get defensive and manipulate his wife? In cases like this, the invested spouse has proven their commitment. Every day they entered that tense home and faced a person who wasn't investing in the marriage. They proved that they believed in the sanctity of marriage. Every decision they made to give up their own wishes, desires, preferences, and voice is another evidence that they were willing to sacrifice their own well-being to keep the marriage. How many more days do you need to prove to yourself that you tried hard enough? If this describes you, if you need a life-saving divorce to save your life and sanity, and to escape a marriage with adultery, sexual immorality, physical abuse, mental abuse, substance abuse, or abandonment and neglect, you are free to go, and God will still love you, really.